2023. And without getting involved in a lot of numbers regarding cubic fill, the application is seeking a special permit to import certain amounts of cubic yards of fill onto the subject property and for the movement of fill on the subject property. We had an original hearing, and Mrs. McEtrick went over some of the basics of the application and the proposed project. And it's my recollection that Mrs. McEtrick indicated that they needed relief from the Milton Conservation Commission. And therefore, after hearing the basics of this, we continued the hearing for this evening so that the applicant and Mrs. McEtrick could appear before the Milton Conservation Commission. In the interim period of time, we did receive a letter from Mrs. McEtrick outlining the present status of the project of May 11th, 2023. And we actually did receive an email from an interested citizen, Jonathan Ronzio. And Mr. Ronzio wrote to, well, it's actually to the Conservation Commission, but it's also transferred to us on an email dated June 10th, 2023, and stating that his name is Jonathan Ronzio, and for himself and Alexandria Ronzio, the owners of the property at 1371 Canton Avenue, Milton. I believe they're abutters to this property. They've discussed the property line and the regrading and replanting plans with the applicant, and based on their conversation, they assent to this particular application. So we certainly thank Mr. and Mrs. Ronzio for submitting their letter in support of the application. So I think it's probably best that we hear from you, Mrs. McEtrick, as to where you stand and how things went before the Milton Conservation Commission, and introduce any updates. I do understand, because the yards of fill onto the property and the movement of the fill is subject to various factors, not only engineering factors, but we need some specific numbers for the special permit that the Conservation Commission, in ways that Marion will mention to us, has suggested recommended fill levels, which apparently are acceptable to the applicant. So Mrs. McEtrick has indicated in her correspondence to us that she's going to seek to amend the application this evening to supply the board with the present proposed importing numbers and the proposed movement numbers. And so we'll entertain that motion after we've heard from Mrs. McEtrick. So Marion, welcome back to the Board of Appeals. It's good to hear from you, and we look forward to being updated as to where this application stands.
Well, thank you very much. And I am Marion McEtrick. I represent the applicant. We did meet in May with you. We have met twice, I think 3 times, with the Conservation Commission, had 2 site walks, and there are 2 outside consultants assisting with this project who have prepared the plans that we have sent to this board. And the plans that have been approved by the Conservation Commission. Brendan Sullivan, who works for Merrill Engineering, is not able to be here tonight. I think Brad Holmes is here. He's an environmental consultant. He may not be. I don't know that he has to be here. But in any case, we've thoroughly reviewed the work proposed for the rear yard with the Conservation Commission, and they have approved the plan that I'm going to discuss with you tonight. And that plan, and they did ask that there be 5 inches of fill rather than 3 inches of fill. That's clean loam topsoil added to the rear area, which increased the amount of fill that had to be brought into the site. So I had to send you a letter in late July amending the application, asking if you would accept an amendment so that the final numbers are 710 cubic yards of clean fill to be brought in, so to be allowed to be brought in. And this is the sum of fill already brought in prior to the application of 160 cubic yards, plus 400 cubic yards of fill that were estimated to provide 3 inches of topsoil. And then the additional amount is for the extra 2 inches that the Conservation Commission wants. In addition to that fill brought in, there's another part of the application that has not changed. That's for fill to be moved around on the property. So it's been a while since we met. So just very quickly, I want to recap. Back in September, Mr. Torkey purchased this property. The yard was excavated and left in an excavated state since about 2005. A large addition had been built on the ranch style house at this site. It's a large lot and never finished. So it just sat there for many years in a rather poor condition. And finally, the property was sold to Mr. Torkey, and he has been working since September to begin to complete the addition. A great deal of work has to be done there. He's actually replacing most of the original house. And he had to go to the Conservation Commission, and he had to come to this board because prior to, he consulted with the building commissioner. He already had brought some fill onto the property. And that's when he found out that, you know, he couldn't move around more than 200 cubic yards in a given 3-year period. And he had brought in 160 cubic yards. That's allowed, the amount brought in. But now with the application before you now, because of the Conservation Commission requirements, a great deal more grading and landscaping is going to be done in the rear yard. So that will require more fill to be brought in. So simultaneously with the application to this board, the applicant applied to the Conservation Commission with a notice of intent. And the reason for that is that in the rear of this property, there's a brook called Balster Brook, and it's a stream. And that has a very large area of jurisdiction for the Conservation Commission. So basically that area of jurisdiction encompasses most of the rear yard of this property, even though it's a very large lot, even comes up a little bit alongside the house, curves around, and then goes back to the back right-hand corner of the property. So as a result, any work in that rear yard is under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. A plan had to be prepared that met the requirements for what you are allowed to disturb within that area, area of jurisdiction of a stream. And so that's where Brendan Sullivan and Brad Holmes were very necessary and important to this project because they're familiar with the regulations, and they prepared a very interesting landscaping plan. There's going to be grass closer to the house, sort of in a curved line. And then behind the grass, there's going to be what's called a natural meadow. That area is not going to be mowed on a regular basis, but probably once a year, maybe twice a year, it will be mowed. And then otherwise it will just grow naturally with wild plants. And then behind that, there's an assortment of bushes and trees, all of which are identified on the plans that I've submitted to you by species. And so as you look into the back, it's going to be, I think, a very attractive backyard. It's not just going to be a big lawn. And the reason it has to be done this way is in order to protect that riverfront area. One of the things that's interesting about this plan is that the work that's going to be done is slightly over the lot line, and it's into the property of the gentleman who has sent the Conservation Commission the email that you read at the beginning of the meeting. And he has reviewed that design, and he has agreed to allow Sabri Torkey to complete that work. And without getting into numbers or anything, basically what's happening in this rear yard is that the grading is going to be going gradually towards the rear, and then it's going to be graded gradually down into the next lot. It may have been more abruptly graded, originally, but in order to absorb water and protect the stream, this gradual grading is what the Conservation Commission required. So the bottom line is that this plan and the grading plan that accompanied it, these plans have been approved by the Conservation Commission. Still waiting to get the order of conditions. That's basically standard language, but it will definitely be tied to this plan. And so depending on what you decide to do tonight, you should be tying any decision you make if you approve the movement of fill to the plan that I've provided, this dated plan. But I would also like you to provide a reference to the order of conditions, which I don't have yet. So I would have to send that to the Board of Appeals. They did say they'd try to get it, but their clerk is on vacation until 3 days before this meeting. So as soon as I have that, I will send it to you, and then I'll provide you with the recording information for it as well. So that's a quick summary of, oh, there is one other interesting feature of this plan. There are little red boxes between the lawn and the meadow area, and those are bird houses. And the idea there is to have some kind of demarcation along that line to remind all owners now and in the future that they are not to go further than that line and create lawn, but it's also kind of attractive and environmentally a nice thing to do. So if you're wondering what those squares are, that's what they are.
What species of birds do you want to attract?
I don't think we got that specific.
Okay, that's not the Conservation Commission.
I think the original, when they pick the design for the birdhouses, it does vary depending on what kind of birds you'd like to have. But they'll have the choice of what type of birdhouses.
Okay.
So that's a quick summary of where we are tonight. And Brad Holmes is here. If you have questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary. Let me talk to my colleagues and see, Mr. Gray, do you have any questions of Mrs. McKittrick regarding your updated presentation?
I don't think so, other than just I was trying to get into my notes, and you probably put it in your letter, but so the total amount of fill that's coming on is 710 cubic yards? Or does that include the stuff that's being moved around?
So the total number of fill being brought in.
Yeah.
It's 710 cubic yards. Keep in mind that 160 cubic yards of that has
Already
already been brought in before we ever came to your board.
All right. I look at the plan, and understand what your presentation has said about it. It's consistent with what I was thinking, and I don't have any further questions.
Okay, Mr. Connolly, do you have any questions of Marion?
Yeah, thanks. Just a few. Thank you for the updated plans. And one of the things we had asked before was about engagement with neighbors. And if I'm understanding the plan correctly, there's four properties that abut, but is 1371 Canton, the Ronzio's property, the only one that has sort of physical impact from the regrading?
It is the only one who has, it's an unusual situation. Yeah, we definitely needed their consent, but I do want you to know that the neighbors on the other side have been at every conservation hearing. I don't know if they're here tonight, and they're very strongly supportive of they like the plan, but they really want to get this work done and clean the property up.
Yeah, okay, great.
So I don't have a letter from them,
But could you identify the Marion for us? Did you have the address of the people to the right?
Is this the Ferbers?
Yeah, the Ferbers. That's
Okay.
right.
Great. And Nick, what's the Ferbers address?
Well, is that on the plan? Which is what I'm looking at. I don't see. I could give you their book and page reference, but that's not what you asked.
Okay, well, we can dig that.
We can look it up.
Okay.
I can find it, but while we're talking, but I have it here somewhere.
Okay, and if not, Marion, just send it to us. That's
okay.
Brian, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. And so so thank you for the follow-up materials you sent us. With your July 17th letter, you attached plans that have I guess it's plan edit date June 14th. I guess they're originally March plans, but I just want to check, are the plans that we would reference in a decision and the plans that were approved by the Conservation Commission the same plans that are attached to your July 17th letter? That's what, okay.
That's correct.
And you said the Conservation Commission granted his approval, you're just awaiting receipt of the order. Is that right?
They voted their approval at the meeting. It was a unanimous vote.
Yeah.
They said that it does take them a while sometimes to actually file the order, but in this case especially, was going to take at least a couple of weeks because their clerk is on vacation.
Yeah.
They will be filing it, and I will be providing that to this board.
Okay. Okay, and then I noticed the email from the Ronzios was from June. So did the Ronzios review the latest version of the plan with the plantings and whatnot? And that when they're informing the board they're approving, it's based on the current plans.
Yes.
Okay. All right, great. That's all I have for questions. Thank you very much.
Good. I don't have any questions. I guess we technically have to deal with the actual amendment of the application, but before we do that, I guess my question is, Mrs. McGetrick, do you expect the Conservation Commission to have this decision, which was unanimously voted, within the next couple of weeks with the order of conditions?
Yeah, what they would produce is the order of conditions. It doesn't recite the vote, but the order of conditions is approved. And there's a 10-day appeal period, but I usually record the order right away. In this case, we haven't heard from anybody. Everybody has, rather than objecting, has said, thank goodness somebody's working on this property and we want it to move forward. So I don't have, I mean, sometimes it's a little frustrating waiting for these orders to be finished, but she's back, the clerk is back, so I will be asking her to get it completed, and the board promised that they would do that. They know that you're having the hearing tonight. So I'll say, within a week, at most 2 weeks, but it should be soon.
What is your preference that once we finish the evidence on this hearing, which I presume we're finishing shortly, that this hearing be continued again for another couple of weeks?
Well, my preference would be, but you may not want to do it, would be that you take a vote if you're favorable and have a contingent on receiving the order of conditions approving this plan.
Well, that was the other alternative that I was thinking, and I guess the question becomes, to what extent do the board members feel like they want to review and concur in the Conservation Commission's order of conditions before voting on the application? Mr. Gray, what do you think?
Well, it would be good.
Can we conditionally vote to approve, but subject to the board's review and agreement or approval of how do I put it? Finding the order of conditions reasonable, and if we don't, reopen the hearing and let Mrs. McGetrick address those issues.
I'm comfortable with that. I think we're not likely to be second guessing Conservation Commission's order of conditions on a project like this, but I'm comfortable proceeding with that in that manner.
Brian, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's important to me to know that the Conservation Commission has, approved and voted to issue an order, but I would think their expertise, I would defer to their expertise on the impacts. And so I'd be comfortable, because we have on the record that the vote has been obtained, that this is just more administrative. So that would be good enough for me.
Okay, then I tend to agree with my colleagues because we couldn't issue the decision without having the order of conditions, and if for some reason we thought that some provision in the order was aberrant, or if after it's issued, if Mrs. McGetrick, this is virtually impossible to happen, but felt that there was a condition there that was not a lawful condition, or that was somehow mistaken or whatever, should get back to us right away, and we could let Mrs. McGetrick go back to the Conservation Commission and straighten out any issue, because certainly that's beyond our expertise.
Mhm.
And the board certainly would not issue a decision until the Conservation Commission has entered their conditions and Mrs. McKettrick is in agreement. And I suppose would need very, very technically, Marion, would need some maybe open-ended extension from you if we have to delay our decision. I believe we have to issue it within 10 days, but I could be wrong there, maybe 20 days. But if whatever reason the Concom was delayed or whatever, we would,
Okay.
you understand that we.
I do. I can provide an open-ended extension letter. I mean, if the board wanted to postpone to another time, I guess I hate to bring the board back for another hearing, but that's your decision, and we're willing to do whatever you feel is best.
No, I don't think it's necessary, and neither do I think my colleagues do, but let's let me do this. Let's first of all see if there's any people present this evening who let's say abutters or members of the public who want to be heard on your updated proposal and ask any questions of you, of your consulting engineers. Julia, is there anybody who has their hand raised and wants to be heard?
Nope, I don't have any hands up.
Okay, I didn't expect that would be the case. Let's, Mrs. McKettrick, do you want to make a formal motion to amend your application that we can have as part of the record and we can vote
Yes.
on? So why don't we let's hear from you on the
Or
motion.
should the motion be, I'm just trying to think, is it a motion? It's,
You asked for a motion to amend the application.
yes. Do I make the motion or do you make it?
Well, I think you need to make it in terms of
Okay, fine.
how your evidence is going to conform with.
All right. Do you want me to do that now?
Sure. You'd be
Okay,
delighted.
so I would make a motion, I am making a motion to the board requesting that the application be amended so that the total cubic yards of clean fill allowed to be brought on the property is 710. This is the total of the previously brought in 160 cubic yards, the 400 cubic yards in the original application, and then the additional 160, the additional amount is to account for additional fill required by the Conservation Commission. Maybe that's too detailed. But
No, I think that's fine. I just want to take it one step further than that. Why don't you just add to your motion, if you would, the issue of movement of the fill? Because I was somewhat surprised that it's not only the addition of the fill, but it's actually the movement of the fill on the property that also requires that's under.
well, the movement of fill is in our application, so
Okay.
that's already before you. That has not changed. That's movement of fill within the property.
Oh.
This is fill to be trucked in trucks. That's what it means. That's what the difference is.
Okay, that's fine.
So I don't need to I'm not requesting amendment for the movement of fill number that was in the original application.
That's for the
And if you
importation.
want me to find it, I will.
Yeah, no, that's, I think that's fine, but if you find it, let us know, and while you're looking, let me ask, Mr. Gray, do you want to be heard on the motion?
Yeah, I'm in favor of granting the motion for the obvious reason that much of the extra required soil is required to comply with what the approval is of Conservation Commission, and so it makes logical sense to me, that 5 inches of fill is better for the plants than 3 inches of fill. So it seems reasonable to me. It's not a significant, terribly significant increase. So I'm in favor of the amendment.
Okay, Mr. Crock, do you want to be heard?
Yeah, no, so I agree for the reasons that Nick just said, and I'd be willing to make a motion to adopt the applicant's requested motion to amend the application to increase the total cubic yards of clean fill by 150 to 710.
Okay, great. So all those in favor of Mrs. McKettrick's motion, please say aye.
Aye.
So your motion to amend is passed unanimously, Marion. Did you want to fill in the citation or something? Or are you content?
Well, I just wanted to state, since I didn't state it before, this application is for movement of 860 cubic yards of fill on the property, within the property. And now that you've approved the amendment, it's to allow 710 cubic yards of clean fill to be brought into the property.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there any, we've handled abutters and the public. Is there any town officer or official that wants to be heard, or any other person who wants to be heard on this particular application? Julia, was anybody have their hands up?
Nope, no hands.
Okay. So let's, I think, Marion, unless you disagree, we should end the evidence at the hearing as.
I'd only ask, I'm pretty sure we're all set. Brad Holmes is here. He's our environmental consultant. Brad, is there anything that you feel should be added or corrected in what I said?
I don't. I think you did a very good job. The board seems to understand the application, and I'm very happy that this is able to be moved forward so we can get that restoration work in place and hopefully do the planting this fall. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Holmes. Appreciate it very much. So let me ask my colleagues, are we content to vote on this application now? And the motion will be to allow the application as amended, subject to the order of conditions received by the planning board, the Conservation Commission, which we understand is going to be issued on a priority basis by the Conservation Commission, knowing that the board needs their conditions in order to complete the special permit decision in this case. So all those in favor of granting the special permit that's requested by Mrs. McKettrick, is there any discussion on this? Nick?
No, I'm
Right.
ready to vote.
No, ready?
Okay, I'm ready to vote. So all those in favor of granting the special permit as pursuant to the amendment as recited by Mrs. McKettrick, subject to the order of conditions of the Milton Planning Board's decision, which should be imminent, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Well, congratulations, Marion. I think
Thank you.
you've got your special permits, and let me see how you want to put this together.
Well, I owe you a copy of the OOC.
Yep.
And I also owe you the address of the neighbor on the right, the Ferbers. And so I will send both of those to you after the hearing. And then I don't know how you want to write the decision. I'm happy to try to help with it. I'd like to see the OOC myself.
Yeah,
But-
and I'd like to see your help on the decision because it's bouncing all over the place here a little bit.
Mhm.
And we prefer to have a decision which is consistent
Yeah.
with the efforts of your professional engineers and the applicant, and not have to go through a series of amendments because we have and we don't have quite the expertise that Mr. Holmes and his staff has. So do you, even pending the order of conditions being received, you want to take a run at a special permit?
I'll be happy to try to, I will provide a draft for the
Okay.
board to review. It may take a week or two because I do want to look at the order of conditions before I do that. And I'll also consult with the engineer Brendan Sullivan, as well as Brad, to make sure that we've accurately described the relief and the plans.
Yeah, that sounds great because there's so many plans and there's a lot of amendments. And I think that you and your team can do that much more efficiently than three Boston lawyers named Joe.
But we're happy to work on it. Thank you.
Okay, that sounds great. Is there anything further to be done on this particular application? I know of none.
I'm all set.
Okay, Nick, you all set?
I am set.
Mr. Conway, are you all set?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So congratulations to the applicant and to Mrs. McKettrick on the special permits, and we appreciate your willingness to put together something that is technically correct. And we will do our best to turn it around as soon as we receive it, and give your client as much time in the good weather to get his work done, and not have this unduly delayed.
Thank you very much.
So great. With all of that, this hearing will be adjourned.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Here.
Good night.
Great. Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you.
Hold on 1 second now. That's just this hearing.
Okay.
Okay, we have a
Oh,
second.
there's another one.
We have we have a second hearing that we have to deal with, and that is the hearing.
Just the Granite Avenue. Granite Place.
Granite
Is it-
Place.
Yeah, so is it 120 Granite Place?
Yeah.
Okay, so the second hearing of the evening that we have involves 120 Granite Place in Milton. We had a full hearing on this particular application. In the interim period of time, we did receive communications from Mrs. McKettrick that the applicant has decided to withdraw the application with prejudice at this particular hearing, and Mrs. McKettrick has presented the board with the proposed withdrawal motion with prejudice, which I think the board members have found to be acceptable. So I guess Mrs. McKettrick, let me just let's briefly hear from you as to the applicant's motion to withdraw.
Thank you very much. The applicant asked me to send this letter. Looks like it was on June 8th, which was not too long after that your hearing, at which any number of issues were raised and were matters of concern for neighbors and so forth. And at this time, he is not intending to apply for any zoning relief. In other words, and this means, remember, this was a fill application. So this means that he can only move no more than 200 cubic yards of fill around in his property. He can only bring in no more than 200 cubic yards of fill. So in the interim, as well as planning to design whatever he can in the more limited rear area behind the house, he's been gradually trucking fill out of his property. That's just an update for any neighbors who are here and are wondering, what's happening. So our request tonight is to be asked to withdraw with prejudice. There's no intention to come back with this application or this design as it was proposed at the original hearing. And I appreciate the time you spent and your patience.
Okay, on the motion, Mr. Gray, do you want to be heard on the motion?
No, I don't have any questions on the motion.
Okay, Mr. Conley, do you want to be heard on the motion?
No, no questions.
Okay, I have no questions of the applicant. Julia, let me just ask, is there anybody out there who has their hand raised and wants to be heard on Mrs. McKettrick's motion?
Oh, no hands.
Okay, so I guess the matter should be put to a vote. I'm not sure technically whether it has to be a roll call vote or not, but it's always safer to do that. So Julia, do you want to call the roll call here? On board members, whether they are in favor of allowing the motion to withdraw the within application with prejudice.
Do I just say each of your names?
Yeah, just ask Nick, Mr. Gray, how he votes, and same for Mr. Conley and same for
Oh.
me.
Okay, Mr. Gray, how do you vote?
I vote in favor of the withdrawal, of the granting the motion to withdraw with prejudice.
Mr. Conley,
I also approve.
and I vote in favor of the motion to withdraw as well. So the motion is unanimously carried, 3 votes to none, with each board each board member voting separately. And I think the board is appreciative of Mrs. McEtrick's presentation in the first hearing and this motion to withdraw. And we thank her for her diligence and courtesy, and wish everyone all the best regarding this particular project. So Marion, do you have anything further to add?
I don't. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
So I think we've covered both matters that are on for this evening. And Nick, do you have anything you want to add to the proceedings?
No, thank you.
Mr. Conley?
I do not.
Okay, and I do not. And so I think I heard a motion to adjourn from Mr. Conley, seconded by Mr. Gray. And so all those in favor of adjourning this hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
I say aye as well. So there we are. The motion to adjourn is unanimously carried, and want to thank everybody for their presence this evening, and for their service to the board, and Mrs. McEtrick for her courtesy and highly professional services in both of these matters, and wish everybody a pleasant evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Julia, thanks for your help.
All right. Good night.